Hey guys, how you doing? I know I'm towards the end and the Warriors are playing tonight, so I just want to start by saying go Warriors. Hopefully you guys are not going to throw tomatoes at me. All right, good. Get that out of the way. So today I'm going to talk about the next wave of HR software, a little bit of which we're building, but just a broader trend that we're hoping to start. So before I get to talking about the next wave of HR software and the next big trends, I want to kind of walk you through how we've gotten to where we are today. So if you kind of way back, before most of us were born, a lot of stuff was done on paper, right? A lot of performance reviews, et cetera, were done on paper. And some would argue that they're still done on paper. But anyway, so that was the world that we lived in. And the first wave of HR software was to just digitize what we did on paper onto computers, right? And that was in the 80s and the 90s. So companies like PeopleSoft and all these guys became huge when they digitized what you've done on paper. Client-server architecture, we saw licenses and support, right? But the focus of HR software then was really on compliance. How do you help HR with compliance? How do you help them with the system, having a good system of record? And the focus was really on efficiency, right? How do you help our employees be more efficient at work was really the focus of the HR software. A bunch of companies became big, a bunch of companies got bought, sold, people made some money, but starting in the noughts, the big thing was cloud, right? Everything moved to the cloud. We said, hey, on-premise deployments are a pain in the butt. We can't quite innovate fast, right? It's hard to maintain, so let's do everything through the cloud. So the big shift in the noughts, and in fact, the stage that we're in right now is everything is delivered through the cloud, right? So we changed not only the delivery model, but we also changed the pricing model. Now it's everything is subscription-based pricing versus license and support. But I would argue that the focus of the software that we've built hasn't really changed. It is still very much focused on compliance, helping HR, right, with having a good system of record, still on efficiency and not enough about anything else, right? And that's the stage that we're at. And if you think about it, from my own experience, I never logged into HR software unless there was an HR person behind me running around with a stick saying, dude, log in there and do your performance reviews. Other than that, I never really touched HR software on a day-to-day basis, primarily because it wasn't built for me, right? It was built for HR people to help them, right? It didn't really help me become a better employee or a better manager of people, and consequently, I didn't see any need for me to log into HR software. Does that make sense? Are you guys with me so far? Does that make sense, right? And so as we think about the next wave of HR software, the big thing is going to be the focus on employees versus just HR, right? Because we're in a knowledge economy. People are our most important asset. Companies that invest in helping their employees develop are going to be much more successful in the long term than companies that don't, right? And there's already a talent shortage and it's only going to get worse. So companies have an urgent need to invest in developing their employees. So HR software needs to align with that and focus on how do we help our employees get better. Right? And one of the analogies that I use to talk about how HR software today is built is, you can build for the buyer or you can build for the user, right? An example of that would be like if you build for the buyer, you get a BlackBerry. If you build for the user, you get an iPhone, right? They're both smartphones, but they're vastly different because of who they optimize the product for. And our belief today is that most of the HR software is a bunch of BlackBerries optimized for the buyer, and that's the reason why users don't actually touch any of that software. Right? So the next wave of HR software is going to be more like the iPhone, focused on the employee and figuring out how the employees can be developed so they can actually get better at work. And it's important to invest in employees. As we talked about, there's going to be talent shortage. There's retention issues, right? Companies that don't invest in helping their employees, see people leave. A lot of people, there's just so many jobs out there that it's hard to keep our people. And if you don't invest in your people, they're going to leave. They're going to get up and go somewhere else where they can actually have better development opportunities. So that's a big reason for us to invest in our employees. And the second thing also is just, it makes sense, right? Employees who have development opportunities tend to work better. They're more engaged at work. They're more productive. They're happier at work, and they contribute more to the bottom line of your company. So it makes sense for us to actually invest in our employees. All well and good, but the question is, if you want to help your employees get better, you've got to really understand them. If you don't understand your employees, you can't really help them get better. And so a lot of companies just ask their people, and there's value in that. But I think the bigger thing is, if you think about how we can learn about understanding our employees, you've got to go to the places where they're hanging out, right? And they're not hanging out in the HR database anymore. They're hanging out in Slack, they're in email, they're in Calendar, they're in GitHub. These are all the places where the employees are actually spending all their time. And they're leaving a tremendous amount of fingerprints in those systems that they use day to day. And the idea behind using data to help understand employees is, can we mine those systems to really understand how people are working, who they're working with, how is work getting done in our company? We can actually figure that out from all these fingerprints that employees are leaving behind. And that's an untapped opportunity for us. So the idea of the next wave of HR software is going to be, it's going to sit on top of the typical HRIS database, and it's going to plug into the different systems that employees use on a day-to-day basis, right, to really understand how they work, who they're working with, all that stuff. Augment that with performance reviews and feedback and all these other systems that we have to really understand how things are going, and then be able to use those insights to help employees and organizations get better. Does that make sense? That's a very, very fast overview of the next wave of HR software. Now, I've got about a minute left, so I can take a couple questions if you guys have any. Yes, sir. Okay. Anybody else want to take that on? I thought so. Yeah. So it's interesting, right? So it's a fair question. It's about who owns the data, right? And are there privacy concerns? Couple thoughts there. One is the employer actually owns all the data, right? So if you're doing work email, all that stuff is actually owned by the enterprise. So that's one. And two, it's interesting how we can actually address that. One of the angles that we're taking is having the employees opt in and providing access to the information versus IT giving us access to the information. So that's another way to say, hey, look, employee, if you want to get the benefit, you're actually signing off and giving us access to systems under the context of IT actually approving it from a security standpoint. So that's another way to address it. All right. Thank you, guys.